Hi guys, this video may be a little bit different. Usually when I record these videos I have, if not a script, then at least some notes or a general idea of what the content is going to be like. Well, as for this video, in the first part I'll touch very briefly on cost. After that, that's where things get a little bit vague. We might end up doing a bit of demolition, but we'll see. Let's head over to Athena and get started. Oh, and don't mind the blanket up here, that was just to avoid overexposure on one side of my face. Okay, you're cool, see you later! Nick commented on my last video and asked if I'd mind talking a little bit about cost, and of course I don't mind. The first question was how much I paid for Athena. I paid the rough equivalent of 45,000 US dollars. Now to some that might seem like a lot because she's got a bit of osmosis and an old teak deck and so on, but please bear in mind that she also has an almost brand new Volvo D240F diesel engine. That in and of itself, including sail drive, installation, the prop and so on, well, I'd say that's at least $15,000. She also already has a lot of the gear that's on my wish list for when I untie the lines for good, including the wind vane you see here behind me. Also, she's got radar, an SSB, and lots of other gear, including sails in reasonably good condition, so overall I'm very happy. And more importantly to me, I've kind of fallen in love with her. Now I know that sounds a little bit silly and maybe a little bit corny, but to me it's very important. It's a big part of why I enjoy doing these projects so much. The second part of Nick's question was how much does it cost to keep Athena up on the hard, and this is where at least some of my American friends, for their own safety, should probably make sure that they're seated. I say that because I know costs vary greatly. For me, I'm looking at something along the lines of 300 US dollars in total, and that's assuming Athena needs to stay up on the hard until next summer, and that includes everything. So that's renting a stand or a cradle and somewhere to keep that, and also electricity for tools is included. Now if I want a heater inside the boat, well, I'll have to pay for the electricity that consumes separately. Now if I had my own stand, the price for that period of time would be 74 US dollars. So if you ask me, that's ridiculously cheap. I'd love to hear what it costs to put a boat up on the hard where you're located, so please go ahead and leave a comment down below. The low cost of keeping Athena up on the hard is a big part of why I don't mind spending another winter aboard Obelix in case Athena's hull doesn't dry out in time. Anywho, let's move on to the somewhat unplanned part of this video. Earlier this week I noticed an area on the hull here behind me where the moisture levels were a lot higher than the surrounding areas. I figured out that area with the high moisture levels were located directly behind the icebox or fridge. Now that area was covered with a piece of plywood and looks something like this. Now that looks perfectly okay, right? So I removed that piece of plywood in order to get a closer look, and this is what I found. Tons and tons of expanding foam. So in an effort to figure out what was causing those high moisture levels in the hull, well, I started removing some of the foam. This is what it looked like after about 3 hours. And this is what it looks like after an additional 3 hours. The good news is that I've found the source of the high moisture levels. So there were tiny cracks in the bottom of the icebox or the fridge. Now water would seep in there and into the foam, and that would then sit up against the hull, causing the hull to be wet, which in turn caused the high moisture levels. This is a piece of the foam. Now this piece of foam had been sitting out for a few days, so it is a little bit more dry now than when I pulled it out, but as you might be able to tell, there's still a lot of water in there. The expanding foam was added later on. In fact, the piece of foam I just showed you was some of the original insulation from the fridge. Now whoever poured that expanding foam in there just poured it in there, and the hoses you see here, those are freshwater hoses. Those were fully encapsulated in the stuff, as were all of the plumbing for the cold plate in the fridge. The hose right here had turned brittle from either the heat when the foam was kicking off or some kind of chemical reaction. It turned completely brittle and just snapped when I pulled it. Right behind the hose you can see the original insulation around the icebox or fridge, and then the expanding foam next to it. My guess is that one of the previous owners of Athena added that expanding foam to provide additional insulation around the icebox or fridge. Now that's a good idea, but I'm not really a big fan of this implementation because all of those hoses and the plumbing for the fridge, it's all encapsulated in that expanding foam, which means you can't really get to it. I want to get rid of all this foam here, and I also want to build a custom slightly bigger box for the fridge here. In fact, from the loose measurements I took yesterday, I think I'll have room for a small freezer section in there, which means ice cubes, which would be luxurious. For now, let's go ahead and get rid of this old box. I've already been struggling with that box for quite a while, and it's really on there. I cannot get it to move, and this is where a lesser man might resort to using a few swear words. And we're back. Now let's see if we can remove that piece of trim up there to get myself a little bit better leverage to get something in there and pry that box out. This piece of trim looks like it's held in place by some screws here, and those screws are covered by wooden bungs, so first we need to remove the wooden bungs. Now that all the screws are loosened, provided the piece of trim is not adhered to the countertop with some sort of epoxy or other magic glue, a few taps with the hammer should loosen it. I don't think I'm gonna reuse these trim pieces here, but just in case I'll use these stir sticks as protection. With this trim piece out of the way, perhaps now I'll be able to get something in between this box and the bottom of the countertop. I've been poking and prodding at that thing for 20 minutes now, and it's obvious it's not going to budge. So now I've got two options available to me. I could either disassemble the entire galley, which I'd like to leave as kind of a last resort, or I could take an angle grinder to the box and remove it that way. Before getting medieval on this box, there are a few things to consider. I'd like to put a new layer of laminate on top of this countertop here. The stuff that's on there now looks kind of dated, it's got some cracks in it, and yeah, I'd much prefer a nice white one instead. I'd also like to remove this stainless steel splash guard thingy over here. Provided I can remove the old laminate and that splash guard thing, there's actually no reason to disassemble the entire galley. The plywood the galley is made of looks to be in good condition, and all it needs is a bit of sanding and some paint. So let's do a really quick test to see if I can remove this laminate and also this splash guard. But before I do that, I want to remove the sinks. Now I know they're held in place by 4 tiny little bolts, so let's grab some tools and see if we can remove the sinks. As I've mentioned, I've moved all of the tools and the stuff I need up here in the V-berth, including this first aid kit, case in point. And this is just gonna get in the way, so let's get rid of it. I keep the pieces I've removed up here in the forward cabin. Every piece is labeled, and it's got any hardware that was mounted on it taped to it. A big part of what's fun about owning a sailboat, for me at least, well, the sailing is fun, sure, but all these projects, that's a really big part of it, for me at least. And, well, a lot of people don't really seem to understand that. Ta-da! I noticed the cracks over here, and this is what I was afraid of. It doesn't look too good, but it's nothing that can't be fixed. This is what one might call a bit of bad luck. I was trying to remove the second sink and this just snapped. Also, I've had a closer look at the piece of plywood that makes up the countertop, and there's a fair bit of dry rot there, so I think my only option here is to yank out that piece of plywood and put in a new one. That's annoying because it looks like I need to remove part of the galley in order to remove the countertop. The countertop extends in underneath these lockers here. It's all one big piece of plywood. The good news is that it's really easy to remove this splash guard thingy here. And although this looks a little bit gnarly, the plywood does appear to be in good condition. I've removed the screws and the pieces here behind me, but it looks like the yard that put this together both screwed and glued them in place. So yeah, once I pull those out, I'm probably going to destroy them in the process. I'm just about at that point where I think it's probably just going to be easier just to demolish the entire galley and just rebuild. But that is going to be a lot of work though. It's kind of funny to think about the fact that all of this started because of a tiny wet spot on the outside of the hull. Whoops, my camera ran out of battery and I'd left my 2 extra batteries here aboard Obelix. Perhaps in the next video I'll be able to show you an at least partly disassembled galley, but please keep in mind that the galley isn't my top priority. My top priority remains to fix the leaky port lights and any other leaks I come across. I'm waiting to hear back from a few companies regarding the port lights, and I'd like to get a few quotes just so that I know what a new set of port light might cost. I'm hoping to be able to refurbish the old ones, but in case I can't, I'd like to know what kind of price I'm looking at. And also, if I learn that the price is really high and more than I can afford right now, well, I know to be extra careful when I try to remove the old port lights. It looks like I'm gonna get my money's worth of boat projects aboard Athena, and I am truly happy about that, and I hope you guys are too. Okay guys, that is going to be it for this video. See you! Yukul and I hope you've enjoyed this video. For more videos like it, click subscribe. Please consider leaving a comment and a thumbs up. It really helps me a lot and I appreciate your support very much. If you're new to the channel, please check out the introduction playlist. If you want to watch every single video I've ever published, check out the playlist named All Videos. It contains every single video listed in chronological order.